My name's Anita Friend, and I'm the head of the Defence and Security Accelerator. We are an innovation organisation that funds and enables innovation for the benefit of UK national security and also UK prosperity. Today I'm going to be talking through how we've been accelerating ideas through to impact. And I'm going to be co-presenting with my colleague Glenn Richardson, who leads for me on strategy and international. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to do a quick pitch on why we do what we do, what we do and our approach, and talk you through some case studies. And then I'm going to hand you over to Glenn, who will give you some of the insights on our future emerging strategy. And then we'll open up for Q&A and discussion. So please, as we're presenting, please do think about those questions, and we'll come to those at the end and make sure that we've got time for that discussion. So without further ado, it's worth always starting with the why. It's always a good place to start. So why does DASA exist, and why do we do what we do? So we were set up off the back of the Security and Defence Review back in 2015, which, among many other things, recognised the essential importance of innovation for national security. And that in particular recognised that we needed to be able to harness and tap into the untapped opportunities that existed within private sector and academia in order to get ahead of our adversaries, in order to have strategic advantage. And that was really why DASA was set up in 2016. And that conclusion has been reinforced, amplified, and sort of remade in all subsequent spending reviews. And we've heard about that as, under previous sort of presentations. But I wanted to very briefly unpack that a little bit, because all of that is a little bit abstract, and it's helpful just to kind of talk through that a bit. So I think, first and foremost, the reason why we talk about strategic advantage is that ultimately science and technology opportunities are exploding exponentially. And that, for the most part, is a really great thing. And those are all opportunities that we can use to our advantage for good. But actually, there are also opportunities that our adversaries, so criminals, states, and terrorists, also use for their objectives and for bad. And I guess the other context to all of this is that the barriers to entry have significantly lowered. So no longer do you need to be a government department with large budgets and a government lab in order to be able to optimise the opportunities of science and technology. It has really become democratised. Anyone can do it. And that means that we're fundamentally, when we're talking about national security and when we're talking about strategic advantage, we're fundamentally talking about a race between us and our adversaries to be able to convert those opportunities quicker and better, so that we can outthink, outmaneuver, and be one step ahead, so we can be proactive in building a safer future, rather than constantly firefighting and sort of being reactionary to the latest threat and challenge. The second thing really to note in all of that is that the good news is that the UK is absolutely brilliant at entrepreneurialism and creativity. And invention is not something that we have a problem with. But quite often we talk about innovation when really what we're talking about is invention. So innovation is only innovation, and this is really important, when we have actually derived benefit from it. So when we have actually determined how we can get benefit from those opportunities that we have converted. And this is the real challenge for defence and security innovation, is that being able to convert those opportunities into benefit. And in order to do that, that means that we actually need to bring together a number of different communities and different expert types. So we need not just to focus on technologists that have brilliant ideas. We need to be able to bring them together with policy experts, strategy experts, operational experts, those that actually are operating on the ground. Because we need to think really smartly and creatively about how we can use those opportunities to our benefit and how we can use those to get one step ahead. So it's really about fusion. So for me, innovation is fundamentally about a fusion of different expertise that come from different communities. That is at the heart. That is what we have to do. And the other thing within all of that is it's not limited to science and technology. Sometimes the best innovations come from the simplest, most straightforward idea, but it's the smart application of that simple idea that actually derives benefit. And so we need not just to limit ourselves to science and technology. So that's the kind of the second bit. And in terms of the problem that the UK faces, is that historically, we've been disincentivizing innovation. We've got brilliant invention, but we're disincentivizing innovation. And here's why. What we are doing is we are asking quite prescriptive questions, typically, and we're having quite a transactional relationship with industry and academia. So what we are doing is we are asking for better tanks, more AI. And funnily enough, that is what we get. We get better tanks, we get more AI. But actually, what we need to do is we need to frame our ask as a problem, as an effect, and to create the space to actually have that innovation and to be able to create those ways in which to achieve benefit. We also need to think about asking a wider, more diverse group, because it stands to reason if we ask those questions of a small group, we're limiting our options. So we absolutely have to be able to connect with other parts of industry and academia and to broaden our opportunities and to broaden our reach to get the very best solutions to the hands of our end users and to build a safer future. And that requires us to have quite a fundamentally different relationship with industry and academia. It requires us not to have a transactional relationship, but it requires us to co-create with them, to understand what the opportunities are, to understand the parameters, and to collaborate and to bring this fusion together. And that is very much at the heart of what DASA is trying to do. Which leads me on to what is it that DASA does? Well, first and foremost, DASA is customer focused. And that's really important for us. Because actually going back to this whole thing of actually we need to focus on innovation, not invention. This is about making sure that what we do is problem-centric. It is purpose-driven. It is fundamentally about building a safer future. Everything that we do must always come back to that. And so our engagement is with engagement with customers across the national security landscape to understand their problems, to understand their challenges, and to make sure that we have a network that enables us to do that. And going back to the kind of the reason why we're disincentivizing innovation and this fact that we've been asking a relatively narrow group, the second problem that we're trying to address within DASA is the fact that actually most of those that can help us we haven't yet engaged with. So most of those that can help us within industry and academia have not yet made the connection between the thing that they're working on and our problem sets. And so that is the second bit of DASA's role, which is really about having the networks and the connections and the insights with industry and academia, as well as with government, to be able to help people join the dots. So to be able to say, this idea that I'm working on can actually help address this problem that belongs to national security. And I understand how I can make a difference. So we start to engage and incentivize whole swathes of industry and academia that we have not yet engaged with, and we're opening up those opportunities. The second thing to sort of mention is the fact that we are across government. So although we are housed within Ministry of Defence, we have a cross-government remit. And that is really important because actually, in terms of this innovation that I talk about, actually across defence and security, and I would wager a bet across the sort of wider range of topics, we actually have a lot of shared interests. And actually the same topics come up time and time again. So by being this integrator and positioning ourselves across government and being able to join those dots, we're not just helping innovators and technologists match their idea to our problems, we're also connecting parts of the system to be able to say, actually, you've got shared interest here and we can collaborate and we can bring those things together. And that's really valuable, that's really powerful, because that's actually more attractive from the market perspective. So coming back to this whole how do we actually leverage this expertise which is within industry and academia? We've actually got to incentivize them. It's got to be attractive. It's got to work for them. And at the heart, it has to be a win-win scenario. So we have to think about can we make it work for industry and academia in the same way as we make it work for us. The second thing is that we are absolutely focused on collaboration. So our approach centres on collaboration. DASA is an enabler. We bring the right bits of the system together. And you may wonder, well, what does that actually mean? Well, actually, in terms of enabling collaboration, we're doing a number of things. We're joining the dots. We're bringing the right people together. We're demystifying and translating. So we're helping those different organisations and different parts of the system that are coming together. We're helping them fundamentally understand each other so that they can actually work out how they can help each other. And we're also making sure that we focus on what we need to focus on, what does success look like, and which bits of the system need to come together. And then finally, we ensure that as an organisation we are innovative. In all of that, learning and growth is crucially important, and a kind of a try, test, refine model is absolutely essential. So making sure that as an organisation we have created a culture that is built on learning and that is built on refining as we go is really important. So before I go into the specifics of how we do that, I just wanted to flick up a quick slide on just to give you an idea of the range of customers that we work for and the networks that we work with in terms of understanding those problem sets. In terms of the how we do that, our mission, as I said at the beginning, is to find, fund and enable innovation for the benefit of national security and UK prosperity. To break that down a bit, in terms of finding, we have a network that is linked across academia and industry. And that is a network of network approaches to make it efficient. So each of our members of our outreach team is effectively linked into a whole series of gatekeepers that gives us access to a bigger network. And that enables us to access over 20,000 organisations, of which 50%, importantly, at any one time, are new to defence and security. So that bringing new, fresh talent into the system is really important. That is mirrored by a network that is within the government community, that is about understanding problem sets for national security, so that we can, by bringing those two networks together, start to do that joining and matching and that sort of demystification. That is all amplified by our comms and by our digital platform that we work on. So that's the find bit. We then need to do a formal matching. So we run competitions and services, and what they do is formally match a problem owner with funding who wants innovation to innovators who have relevant ideas and technology that can help them. And we do that through a formal competition, which means that we can ensure that it is transparent, which means that we can build confidence in the market. So actually by having that robust assessment of the fact that they are wanted by government actually really helps to build confidence in the things that we're building. And we do that to give out R&D contracts, so to enable us to nudge the technology in the direction that we need and want it to go from a national security perspective. That building of confidence is really critically important, because what we've learned over the years is that badge of approval that our suppliers get by having DASA fund them and by DASA saying that actually that this is something that we want and need, that has enabled them to attract external funding and support, which actually enables them to scale and grow in the way that they need to. And actually our gearing effect is on average, for every £1 that we're spending, the suppliers are getting £4 back from external funders outside of government. And so getting that gearing is really important. And then the final thing around enablement. So having supported that technology and nudged the R&D in the right direction, we also need to demystify the world with which they're working in. So our enablement is about helping them to understand the national security world, helping them to understand who they need to connect with, helping them to understand what the journey is going to look like, what barriers they're going to need to overcome, helping them to plan that in, helping to connect them to the right parts of the system, and helping them also to think about their commercialization strategy critically. Because coming back to this win-win, innovation only works if it works for government and also for the private sector suppliers. It has to be something that will actually make them profit. So we need to help them think about how are they going to have a commercially viable way to deliver what we need from them so that we can actually have a sustainable model that will work. And before I hand over on strategy, I just wanted to talk through a few quick case studies. So the first one here is Trilateral, and they have done some work with us on ethical AI and using that to assess the risk of individuals that need safeguarding and to be able to speed up safeguarding decisions. And that is something that is being deployed in Lincolnshire Police at the moment in practice. It came through our open call, which is a deliberate call mechanism, which is to allow unsolicited proposals, so things that no one is looking for, which is in our collective blind spot, which we then match back to problems and to funders after we've actually got those proposals in. So this is really important. This is something that we wouldn't have found otherwise. They weren't operating in the national security sector. It wasn't something that anyone was proactively looking for, but we found it through our open call. And through the support that we provided, been able to link them up with Lincolnshire Police, allowing them to do tests and pilots and trials to be able to develop that in an operational environment, has enabled them to test and demonstrate the value of what they have built. And just to give you a key statistic, they have been able to identify 16 individuals that require safeguarding 6 months quicker than what would be otherwise required. And that may seem like quite an arbitrary statistic, but in safeguarding, actually time can mean the difference between life and death for those vulnerable individuals. So this is a really big transformational effect for safeguarding. And what is really key is that it depended on expertise from a number of different fields, and the way in which Trilateral built ethics and operational requirements into their model is what has allowed them to be successful, and that enabling of actually joining them up with the right parties is what has been really transformative for them. The second example is Createc. That also came through our open call, so similarly it was an unsolicited proposal. And this is using LiDARs, so lasers, to be able to track points in a crowd and to essentially to be able to, in an anonymized way, be able to predict and model the behaviours of a crowd, which is particularly important for protective security and for crowded places. And in a similar way to the first example, this was something that they were able to test and trial with the help of DASA in Waterloo, and actually to be able to use it, which is what you can see in the picture by Network Rail that have procured it, but also we're now working with them through follow-on support to be able to help them to adapt it into the airport environment, and they're working with Luton Airport to look at how they might adapt a similar technology for use in a different setting. The other thing that I should highlight in that both of these two examples that I've just shown, the acceleration from idea to impact has been relatively quick. So in both two examples, we've gone from idea to impact in roughly 20 months. So this kind of notion that innovation will take a long time, actually you can do it quickly if you get those connectors and enablers in place. And the final example that I wanted just to quickly touch on is LiveLink. And the reason why this is particularly valuable is, one, it's an example of why actually having those cross-system links are really important. So this was something that was funded by the Home Office and DSDL. It is using cheap sensors to be able to detect and predict and defend against UAS. And it was something that was, as I say, was sponsored and funded by the wider national security world. But it is something that has now been pulled through for use in the Royal Navy. because it actually had wider application, and it was something that we were able to show those links for. And what's really critical here, and the kind of the final point I wanted to sort of land on before we go onto strategy, is that actually this unlocked capacity as well as it has unlocked capability. So actually the solution that we provided was significantly under the budget that the Royal Navy were expecting to have to spend on this capability. And so for the investment that DASA put into this innovation, the government made 10 times its savings in the amount of money that it saved on the contract that it was able to get through that is actually now delivering for the Royal Navy. So those are just a few of our examples, but they are a short list of a much bigger sort of pot. So DASA has funded and completed over 1,000 projects. Of those, 147 are having real-world impact in some way, and 31 of those are in actual real live deployment within some part of the national security system. That leads me neatly on to talking about our future, and I'll hand over to Glenn.
Thank you, Anita, and good afternoon, everybody. So Glenn Richardson, lead strategy in international, and I actually came to DASA from a frontline command innovation hub, so was actually trying to deliver the innovations that DASA provides with great effect. And I actually came here to try and make some positive changes for the future. Now, all of the work that we've done on our strategy is based on the Integrated Review Refresh. The Integrated Review Refresh is basically the backbone of what we're going to do for the future in the whole of defence and security. And it basically offered that the predictions that were made during the strategic review were mostly right. So most of the things that we talked about in terms of geopolitical change, environmental change, and the types of things and the threats that we'd be facing were broadly right. However, the pace of change was the thing that caught us off guard, and we needed to be quicker in our adaptation. So what we've done in DASA is have a close review of all of the processes that we offer, and essentially everything that we're now about to change is to bring entrepreneurs together with the intrapreneurs like yourself to make your jobs easier, to make change where you are. So we're going to be starting with a new approach to competitions. So the new approach to competitions will basically bring the end-to-end process across departments closer together. And I'll focus mostly on defence for the moment because that's where we've done the most work, but obviously we hope to translate this across to our other partners as well. Now, what that actually means in practice is bringing together the people that actually deliver capability into capability programs into the upfront part of competitions that we put out. And we'll be doing that in a problem curation service that's going to last a few months. So instead of just taking a challenge as read, taking it to market, we'll be doing a lot more with that challenge to try and establish who the cross-government stakeholders might be who will also have an interest in this challenge, who the potential owners are for the challenge that are ultimately going to pay for the capability that comes from the end of it so that we can actually get past that funding to TRL7 and then having nothing go anywhere. We're going to do much more strategic engagement with industry. So we have a defence suppliers forum set up with whom we're working on projects to make sure that we can diversify the supply chain through much closer engagement with every member of their organisation. We're going to be doing much earlier engagement on the problems. So that relationship with industry is no longer going to be about sending a requirements demand signal, but actually talking about a problem demand signal so that we can look at this from both the strategic point of view with things like, for example, the defence drone strategy that sets out that the UK wants to be a world leader in this sort of field, right the way down to the specific problems that we might be facing in places like Ukraine, where SMEs, entrepreneurs, and others might be able to make a huge difference for us. We'll also be taking a new approach to risk because we recognise that failure is actually the building blocks of success, but we're going to start taking bets on the things that we think are going to succeed right up front. If we have to solve a problem, we're going to put in place the mechanisms to realise that capability into service right from the off. What does that actually mean? Well, if you think about how we fund innovations at the moment, we tend to take them to the point where when they're a viable product, we start thinking about training. We start thinking about how we write the manuals for these things. We start thinking about how it's going to actually attach into our ICT systems or onto our vehicles. Well, we're going to start betting up front that we're going to be successful in these innovations and put in place those things that do things like the balance of investment process, the training, right up at the point where it could be most relevant. Now, we may find, obviously, that things still fail along those lines, but I can honestly guarantee most of the time we learn more about what we don't want to do and what we do want to do from failed things as much as we do for those things that actually get through. Finally, we're also going to make sure that we get end-user buy-in. I mentioned that things tend to get funded up to TRL7. DASA is going to do a lot more in the future to join up the people that can actually write the checks to actually bring these capabilities in. Now, that means working with programs, for example, in defense like Boxer and Ajax, but it also means working closely with digital providers, for example, to make sure that we're not doing, for example, AI projects that are never going to actually make it across to the system. I've laboured on that first point for quite a while, so I'll move on to partnering. Now, I've mentioned, obviously, a closer relationship with industry, but we also need to bring all parts of the system together right up front when we start putting out competitions or we start talking about the problems we might want to solve. So that includes members of the acquisition teams and the commercial teams who are often consulted at the point where we've gone out, done a lot of work, and then have to unpick things. We've learned from that, and we're going to make sure that our commercial process and commercial teams are right with us from the beginning. Then there's our networks. DASA already has a fantastic network across the UK. We're very much embedded in academia. We have the regional defence and security clusters that are being formed across the UK to make sure that we can do outreach with industry and engage much closer. We'll be continuing to invest in those, but DASA will also be launching DIANA, which is the Defence Innovation Accelerator North Atlantic that brings an international dimension to our networks. I'll cover that in a little more detail in just a moment. And then finally, there's access to services. So DASA needs to do more to signpost across government. Everything that we do ultimately has read across to almost every department that you can think of. When we're looking at, for example, target acquisition systems, airports might be thinking about facial recognition, but there are also things like number plate recognition that could be magnified across departments. And we're going to be doing more to make sure that we actually do more in that space. Now, I mentioned DIANA, which is essentially a construct that's going to take NATO ideas to market, to have them solved by a number of different sort of parties. They could be defence primes. We're not going to sort of not allow defence primes to join in, but we're mostly going after SMEs and small companies, entrepreneurs, and the types of people that are going to bring a lot of diversity to the issues that we face. Now, this builds on services that we already provide, including our business growth service. And in fact, because of the close alignment to DIANA to what DASA wants to do, in the summer, we'll also be launching DASA's Business Acceleration Services Unit in the heart of London, in Imperial College campus in White City. Now, why is that important? Because it will change parts of the model that we're going to bring forward. For example, taking cohorts of of businesses through our systems to not just give them a challenge, but also to mentor them and to train them on how to work with defence, how to build a business, because many people don't know how to do that, teach them how to work with NATO, and potentially teach them how to actually work on an international level if the technologies that they're bringing to us or the ideas that they're bringing to us could work in that way. So thinking about exportability and that link back to UK prosperity. We can also offer access to users and test facilities, which is something that small companies are really crying out for. Some of the larger companies can obviously get close to Department of Transport and others to have deep conversations. Well, actually, smaller players can't tend to do that. And that's one of the things that DASA can do is broker that relationship between the smaller companies, the individuals that want to come and talk to us, and other parts of the system. We also offer access to capital, and this can be transformational for some companies because we can do that incredibly quickly. We can actually move, our KPI for getting to contract from an initial idea is actually 6 weeks, which is incredibly fast, and we can actually do it faster. But that capital can be of various different sort of pots. We can fund projects directly, which is what we've been doing for a long time, but we can also offer grants through a thing called the Defence Technology Exploitation Programme, which enables companies to get a grant to actually partner if they've got an idea that needs to be scaled up with, for example, a defence prime like Thales, so that they can learn from those companies, share their experiences with those companies, but most importantly, manufacture at scale to meet the demands of large government departments. We also offer innovation loans, which is a capability to actually give people small interest loans that they can repay if they successfully meet their aspirations with us in terms of their ideas coming through. And we can also access venture capital. So in the future, you'll be seeing a thing called the NATO Investment Fund, and we also have the NSIF, which is the National Security Strategic Investment Fund, which is a consortium of venture capitalists who can start to invest in those small companies that might be changing all of our futures. And then finally, I'll just finish up with the fact that there's a thing here about how you can actually help us. Now, there's lots of things that you can do that are listed on that slide, but the most important thing is talk to us. We are a learning organisation, and we've viewed everything that we're doing through a defence and national security lens, but we know that we can partner more greatly across other government departments. I have no doubt whatsoever that the challenges that we face are shared by many in this room. So the biggest help that you can be is to come and talk to us, whether that's on our on our presence on the floor plate, or here during the Q&A section, which I'll now move across to. Thank you very much. That's your notes if you want them.
So we're now open to questions. So if you would like to indicate if you have any questions to ask, we've got a roaming mic that is going around, and we'll try and get through as many as we can in the time available. So there's one in the centre there.
Hi, I'm Tara Dudhill from Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. So really interesting to hear about how you facilitate collaboration between government and industry and other partners. What are some of the main lessons do you think that we could transfer to facilitate wider collaboration between government and industry?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I'm happy to start. So I think probably one of the key lessons is this early. The earlier you can start to do that collaboration, the better. And having that early conversation that very much focuses on the outcome. What is it that we're actually trying to achieve? What's the purpose? Understand the problem in more detail, the kind of the parameters, the limitations, what are the opportunities, and what's the aim. And to do that as early as you possibly can, because ultimately you need to get that common understanding at the start. If you can get that, then the collaboration from that point forward becomes easier, and you start to line things up. So that would be my main takeaway.
The only thing that I would add to that is when we talk to industry, a lot of people don't actually understand what the problems are that we actually have, and that can be on a grand scale. So, for example, I mentioned the integrated review. Defence's response to that was a thing called the Defence Command Paper Refresh, which basically talked about the changes that we want to make and the fact that we're going to clarify our priorities to industry. There were 16 priorities through that document, all in different places. And one of those was around people, which there's another review that's got a dozen priorities around people. Now, that is a really confusing signal. When industry are looking to try and help us, they don't know what we want. So I think a really thorough review of what you're putting out to attract people in would be the first thing that I would personally do.
I'd agree with that. Thank you. There's one over here, please.
Hi, I'm Rowan Gray from the Office of Public Guardian. We're an arm's length body of the Ministry of Justice, but it's not really relevant for my question. I noticed in a previous presentation they were talking about data democratization, and you very briefly touched on that and said that's actually given a lot of people access, which is a security problem. I just wanted to, pry into that a little bit more, because I thought that was a really interesting point that I haven't, because they're pushing for more democratization, but from your point of view, is that a good idea?
Yeah. So I think the reality is that that it has democratized in general, and that obviously gives our adversaries, as I was saying earlier, an advantage. I think that means that we need to look broadly and diversely, but we need to do that with risk in mind. So ultimately, this is all about conscious and calculated risk taking. So we're weighing up the risk of disclosure in terms of information against the benefit in terms of the added capability and capacity that can give us, and doing that in a measured and controlled way. So risk-taking, but not reckless risk-taking, I think is really important. And when we're thinking about working out who to fund and which investors to attract, there obviously has to be a kind of a risk check that goes over that to ensure that we're not inadvertently introducing risk into the system that creates problems from a national security perspective. So it's doing that really consciously and deliberately. So I think we absolutely have to democratise in the same way as our adversaries are, and widen out and to broaden out, but we have to do it consciously and carefully, I think would be my observation.
The only thing I would add to that is 2 points. Firstly, I think the environment in which you operate has changed so much that protecting our information takes on a new dimension. I mean, we're looking at the things that are happening out in the Ukraine, and the best view you can get of that is off Reddit and off of the stuff that's being sent forward. I mean, we protect information that actually is normally public domain anyway. So I think we need to sort of have a bit of a mindset shift. And one of the things I will say for defence is that they are trying to establish a thing called the Innovation Foundry, which is essentially a fast-track way of bringing people into the wire so that, yes, we still have to protect our information, but we can make it much quicker for people to access that and then start to basically model off of what we've got to work with us.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one quick question, so we'll go over here.
Hello, Boris Adlam from the Cabinet Office. I'm very impressed by what you're doing in joining different departments together because, for example, I discovered that the Home Office has an accelerator, which is also very impressive. Do you have links across all departments? Because that would be great, because I think a lot of, every time I meet somebody from a department, I say, oh, I didn't know that that department does innovation. Oh, that's very interesting. I mean, do you have something you can share with us now?
Yes, so we deliberately link and integrate across all of the national security departments, so we do link in that way. We also work in close collaboration with other innovation-enabling organisations, including, I think, probably the Home Office innovation organisation that you are mentioning. And actually, playing to our respective strengths has been something that has been a particular focus in how those innovation organisations can come together. But yeah, some of the examples that I quoted earlier are examples of things that had started off as Home Office sponsored innovation projects and have gone on to be things that have had a benefit in defence, and there are examples that happen in the opposite direction. So yes, in short, we do. I don't know if you want to add.
No, I don't think there's anything to add to that one.
But thank you. I think we're coming close to time, but we might have chance for one very quick question if there's another further one over there.
3 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tony. I'm from the NHS. You spoke really eloquently up front about the difference between invention and innovation. I wondered if you could give some thoughts on the conditions for success in adopting proven innovation from elsewhere, particularly other sectors.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think part of going back to my earlier point of innovation doesn't necessarily have to be cutting edge technology. It can be smart application of something. One of the things that we've really kind of focused on and been able to pull through is innovations that have come from other sectors and then applying them smartly and adapting them in a way that will work for defence and security. I think it comes back to my earlier point. In order to do that, it absolutely has to be purpose driven. There has to be absolute clarity around what success factors, what are we trying to achieve, what is really important, what are the trade-offs that we need to make, and what are the parameters. So understanding that upfront with the customer organisations across national security is the first key thing. And understanding that from a supplier perspective, actually for them, defence and security is often quite a niche market. It isn't sustainable for them to operate only within that market. And so actually helping our suppliers to think about dual use and to think about how their innovations will have applicability in a number of different sectors and helping them to consider that as part of their commercialisation strategy. And that actually therefore means that a lot of the innovation that we enable and support don't just have benefits for national security, but they also have benefits for other sectors. And so that is obviously overall a good thing. And indeed, if you go to our stand, at the moment we've built our stand here out of QuickBlocks, which is an innovation that we support, which is sort of flat pack sort of blocks that you can build. It has defence application, but it also has humanitarian assistance application, and it has been used in public events and within the entertainment industry. So it's a concrete example that is here, quite literally, that has multiple application, and I think that's a really key thing for us to focus on.
I can see the time is flashing at us, but the only thing I'd add to that, sort of just looking to the future, is I find that there are things that we're doing that aren't helping ourselves, like the fact that our acquisition systems don't talk to each other and we have different ones in different departments. And finally, I know I've just sort of pilloried ourselves for having 16 priorities out there. We are actually quite good at articulating our problems. It's just we're not very good at prioritizing them. We're terrible at exposing where we're doing really well and the solutions that we find. We're not sharing that information as well as we could. So in terms of success factors, I don't know what I should be looking at to pull in would be the first thing. I'm sure there's so much more that we could pull in defence and that there's so much more we could offer to your department, but we're not sharing it. So that would just be my observation.